Well, I hope you are ready for an interesting program. I'm going to introduce our moderator, and I'll let her introduce our guest. You've probably heard this story throughout the 20 years of the festival, but it never gets old for me to retell it. So our moderator today has a unique and special connection to the Cherry Blossom Festival, as she has been our patron for 20 years, and we refer to her as the mother of the Cherry Blossom Festival, yes. She said, at least it's not grandmother. Call her the mother. So the story about Mary Jean's arrival at the Cherry Blossom Festival goes like this. Many years ago, while working at Walmart, one evening I was having a conversation with my coworkers about World War II and the Eisenhowers. And the younger people that I worked with that were around my age didn't know who I was speaking about. And that alarmed me as a history nerd. So I just read an article about Mary Jean living in Kansas City, Missouri. And so I reached out and said, would you come and speak to our high school about your grandparents? And so she did. Many of you remember that very well. It was a special visit, but little did we know that that visit would lead to a long-term friendship and support and the Cherry Blossom Festival. For during that visit, Mary Jean made a comment that if you were interested in American history, and particularly the presidency, you had to travel to all these various presidential libraries and birthplaces and cemeteries. There was no place to go to learn about everybody. Well, that kind of stayed in my mind. And so sometime later, when we decided to plant cherry blossom trees here in town for beautification, of course, when you plant cherry blossom trees, you think of cherry blossom trees, what do you think about? Well, Washington, D.C., history, of course. And we didn't just want to have a craft festival. Everybody has a craft festival. So I thought, why couldn't we have a history festival and build that around the blooming of the cherry blossom trees? And so Mary Jean's comment kind of came to life. Little did she know what she was going to cause. My wife often says, I'd like to talk to Mary Jean. I'm kidding. So it's an honor to have her.
I've known you since before your wife.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
She has known me since before my wife. It's an honor to have her today here as our moderator. She has such a special relationship with our special guest, and I'll let her tell you more about that. But without further ado, if you'd put your hands together for my good friend, Mary Jean Eisenhower.
Well, he and I have a special relationship too. Back in 1960, yeah, no. I was his first subject as a Secret Service man. And Mr. Landis, which we had to call you that. We couldn't call you by your first name, you know, because we were little kids and we were guided and all that stuff. But I'm hoping that you know, I've been here many times and shared many stories about my grandfather, and I'm hoping that you will share some stories of your own about him. You know, I happen to be partial to him, and you know, so I'm gonna be watching you.
Hi. Thank you. I first joined the Secret Service in October of 1959. At that time, everything was pretty much on-the-job training. I started in the Cincinnati field office. I was there for 6 months, and after 6 months, the normal routine was to send somebody on a temporary protection assignment. And my temporary assignment was 30 days in Gettysburg. And I mean, I was all excited, and I wanted to be on protection. This is what I wanted to do. And my first day, I had a 4 to 12 o'clock shift. And I showed up at Major John's residence, and the only person there was the agent in charge, Bill Barton. And we were standing in the driveway, and he was trying to explain to me a little bit about the job. And everybody was out except for David, who was in the house. And we hadn't been talking for more than 10, 15 minutes. And David came out and said he wanted to go over to Granddad's house. So Bill looked around and he said, well, Paul, you take that station wagon over there. And it was basically, our office was a station wagon outside the house. And he said, David, you take David in that car and he'll tell you how to get there. So we get in the car and he says, hi, I'm David, I know. He said, I'm Mr. Landis, turn right. Okay, we turn right, and I have no idea what to expect. Do I look for kidnappers coming out of the ditch or whatever? And David turns to me and he says, you're new at this, aren't you? I said, well, yeah, how do you know? And he said, well, you're supposed to announce over the dashboard radio where we're going. And we didn't have dashboard radios in Cincinnati, so I'd never worked one. So I said, well, how do I do that? And he says, well, you take the microphone off the dashboard, push the little red button, and you announce this. You say, crown, crown. This is Grand 1 departing Sunflower, I think, or en route Sunshine. What are those two? Which was the code name for both Eisenhower's residences, the farm, Ike's farm, and the house. So I got on the radio and I said, crown, crown, and that crown was the communications center in the basement of the White House. And they kept track of everybody's movements. So I went through the procedure and turn right. Okay, I make another right turn. And we got to the entrance to get back to the farmhouse. The farmhouse was like in the center of, I think, 198 acre farm. And we get up to the security booth, which is right outside the farmhouse. And David gets out of the car and he goes, grabs a basketball. So he starts heading around to behind the house. Says, come on back with me. He said, do you like basketball? And I said, well, that's my second favorite sport next to golf. So we get in the back, and he's dribbling and shooting baskets, and he said, you want to shoot some baskets? Oh, why not? You know, we're in the middle of nowhere, and so we start shooting, and then he says, do you want to play horse? And I said, okay. I guess assume you know pretty much what horse is, where you take crazy shots and you want somebody to miss. And so I was wearing a sport coat, and it was kind of cramping my style. And so I took my sport coat off and put it at the side. And I took my sidearm off and set that on top of my sport coat. And we're really being crazy. And all of a sudden I hear, hello, David. And I turned around and there was President Eisenhower right there. So I figured I didn't know if I was going to make it through that day or not. So anyway, I survived. But David was 3 days short of his 12th birthday. So I got my first lesson in protection from a 12-year-old, basically.
Well,
So talk about on-the-job training. That was pretty loosey. So
I might add that David actually taught you about Roger, because in the radios, they would go, Roger, and they'd hang it up, right? I thought Roger was a real person. And I remember one time the guy on the other end sneezed, and I said, oh, Roger's got a cold. So you learned about Roger from David.
Okay. So, I don't recall anything. So,
Well, that might have been Mr. Barton, I don't know.
okay.
Mr. Holman.
The only one thing, very fond memory I have was December 1960. We had a huge snowstorm in Gettysburg, and I was I was on the day shift then, and I was in the car, which was our office,
Right.
and you were walking out to the office, and
I had to get my juicy fruit.
I wish I had a picture of it. She gets halfway to our car, and she starts crying, and you were up to your knees in snow, and I had to come out and rescue you from so,
Well, I had a ritual every Sunday morning. I would read the funnies with you guys, and you'd give me a stick of juicy fruit. And I mean, that was what was done on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember that snowstorm because my mom ended up, later on after I got rescued and got back to the house and all that stuff, made us change clothes into, I think I was wearing my pajamas maybe when I came out. And anyway, she made us go play in it. I'm like, no, And so Susie wrapped up a little snowball, and she threw it, and she said, I've played. So, yeah, that was, I remember that storm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, Gettysburg was wonderful. It was an easy, relaxed atmosphere. All the Eisenhowers were very friendly. Everybody was down to earth. The whole village really kind of just took us all in. Well, I didn't do, how much time do we have?
We've got plenty. We have another one we want to cover, though, too. So.
Okay. Oh, we did have one trip. The president had a cottage or house in Augusta, Georgia. And that Easter, we went down to Augusta, and I had the midnight shift, and we just sat outside in a lobby in the house, and I got off shift at 8 o'clock, and I'm walking back to the cars, and somebody stopped me and said, the president wants to play a round of golf, and we're short of agents, and we need help. And, all right, I'm 2 weeks into protection with children. I have no idea what the president detail is like or what that goes on, and I said, well, you just go over to in front of the clubhouse, and somebody will help you out there and give you tell you what to do. So I go over, and limousine was there, and they popped the trunk on the limousine, and all I see are Tommy guns, shotguns, and all these weapons, and it's like, wow, I'd never seen anything like this. And they had golf bags there, and they had all the golf bag they handed me was probably a 1930s golf bag, and it had 3 golf clubs in it, and they were hickory shafted golf clubs, and they had a mashie and a spoon, which was equivalent to a 3-iron, had a head about that big. It's not like the golf clubs they have today. And a niblick was the other club. And a .30 caliber M1 carbine, which was World War II surplus. And he said, well, what do I do now? And I said, well, you just go over in front of the first tee, and somebody will give you directions. Well, I'm a golfer. I'm glad to be at, at the Masters, the golf club, and I'm walking around with this antiquated golf bag. I'm feeling a little shy, but anyway, I got the first tee. They said, Paul, just go down about halfway down the first hole, and just watch out for any trespassers, anybody coming in. So I'm down and I'm watching the president, and I'm not sure who all was in that foursome. Who is friend from the pig farm across the street? Oh, they played poker a lot. I don't.
That could be several.
Okay,
That could be
you
a
didn't
few.
know about that then.
Well,
So,
I kind of knew about it, but I didn't.
but I'm watching, and Ike is not doing too well, and none of them were playing too well, and they got down to the green. Well, they putted out, and then they were standing by the flag, and they were trying to decide. They were playing so badly, they couldn't decide whether to continue on to the second hole or go back and tee off and play the first hole again. So I got kind of enchanted I wondered what they were talking about. So I walked up to the green and I'm listening, and we had an agent who was there, John Campion, and his code name was Dragon, and he fit the code name was very fitting. And I'm standing there and I'm transforming this discussion on the green into, all right, they're in the stateroom in the White House. We've got a big decision we have to make. And everybody said, well, gee, I don't know, Mr. President. What do you think we should do? Gee, I don't know. So where should we plan, whatever? And I'm engaged. My imagination is running wild, and I have all this situation going on. And I see SAIC Campion walking towards me. Well, he wasn't walking, he was stomping. And he came up to me, and his face was beet red, and the spittle was flying out of his mouth, and he says, Agent Landis, if the attack comes, it's going to come from the rear, not from on the green. And I got the message, and I scooted ahead. They decided to go on to the second hole. I scooted ahead, and I did find the golf ball. But the ironic thing about that, when I was in Dallas, where did the attack come from? It came from the rear. And I just thought, there was so much truth in Campion's lesson. Anyway, this was my first, I was 2 weeks in the service. And I got back to Cincinnati. The agent in charge was Jerry McCann. He he said, read this. I was transferred back to Gettysburg on a permanent assignment. So everything went well, and we just had a wonderful time there. Everybody was terrific. So.
Well, we sure enjoyed it, and thanks for the juicy fruit, by the way. But, you have kind of an interesting array of experience, and the other is that your next assignment was President Kennedy. And I understand also that you were present when he passed. And I was wondering, what do you think about the things that are going on right now where, they're saying that even Oswald might be innocent and that kind of thing. Do you have any, comments or interest on that?
I think I better avoid that.
Okay. All right.
So,
Fair enough.
No, I just, when I had, we reached the end of the summer, and we spent a Labor Day weekend in Newport, and from there I had my first formal training. I had Treasury School, which was 6 weeks, and 6 weeks of Secret Service school. I mean, that is so laid back to what goes on today and the training the agents get. And then I was transferred to the White House. And I was again on midnight shifts. And finally in February, it was the first opportunity I had to see President Kennedy. Wow. And I was day shift. I was stationed by the main entrance to the White House from the Oval Office. And President Kennedy came by, and I saw him walking toward me, and I opened the door, and I said, good morning, Mr. President. He nodded his head. He was with somebody who was engaged in talk, and I thought nothing of it. Well, the next morning, I'm on the same post, and President Kennedy was coming down from the residence to walk to the White House. And he walking by, I said, good morning, Mr. President. And he said, good morning, Mr. Landis. You could have knocked me over with a feather. And that's what he was like. He took the time and trouble to get to know all the agents. And that's really what the family was like. And I mean, I think all the agents on that detail with him kind of felt the same way. You were taken in and like just part of the family.
Well, I think too that Kennedy engaged a lot of people like family. For example, when my grandfather was hospitalized, he went to Walter Reed, and he was talking to him about the Bay of Pigs and those types of problems, and they were like father and son. And I think one of my favorite pictures ever was of Granddad and President Kennedy walking side by side, and Granddad has his hat behind him, and it's a shot from the back, and it just looks like the old guy's letting the new guy in, and they had a very special relationship, and considering how far politically they were, the respect was just amazing, and you kind of wish that would happen now.
Right. You don't have that today.
No.
Yeah. There was a huge difference in personalities. I thought Ike was kind of gruff. He was a general. I mean, and President Kennedy was, I don't know, more kind of carefree. It was more relaxed atmosphere.
Yeah.
So.
Another, well, I think all ex-presidents, no matter what you know, ship they sailed on, they worked together, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
And you probably saw a lot of that, where they,
Yeah. Well, politics was a lot different back then, too.
Yeah.
You voted for who you wanted. If they lost, everybody you still got together and
you were still Americans.
You just accepted.
Yeah.
After all, it was like, they're the president. Let's respect the position, and they're our leader.
Right.
There was no hate or animosity which I think we have a lot of now. So.
Right. Well, would anybody have any questions for Mr. Landis? Yes.
I have a question about Eisenhower's time at the Gettysburg home and farm. When special guests would come in, did he like to take them out on the battlefield? And what was security's reaction to that?
You have to understand, when I was there, I was assigned to the children. I had nothing to do.
Careful.
So, end of conversation. So it was different. I had no idea what went on with the president's detail. And when I went on with the Kennedy detail, I was at the White House for 6 months, and I was transferred then. John was starting to walk. They needed another agent on his detail, so I was transferred to that. I was very young. I was young, looked young. I didn't look nearly my age. I personally think they didn't know what to do with me. So they couldn't have this 18-year-old looking kid with the president.
Right.
And it was like, that's how I got, I don't want to say stuck with the kids.
I forgive you.
That's it. Other questions? How about questions for Mary Jean?
Well, my question was actually for you, if you don't mind. It's about, it sounds like you were pretty close to the Kennedys beyond just a working relationship, almost like you really cared. How did that day affect you, and what does someone who has that job do the next day after you've lived through that day?
Yeah, help me out, Rich.
So,
First of all, just to let you know, I have a severe hearing loss. I have a hard time understanding a lot, so Rich is going to help out with repeating your
so
questions.
Paul, the question really was, the Kennedys you were very close to the Kennedys, and you cared a lot about them, not only as your protectees, but also really kind of an extension of your family. That's the way you learned to care. How did November 22nd, 1963, what was November 23rd like? Or really, you've told it before, but those 4 minutes changed your life, so talk about that.
September 23rd started out, it was a beautiful sunny day. The day before, we made 3 stops, San Antonio, Houston, and Fort Worth. The crowds were fantastic. There was no animosity. We had a briefing on Wednesday before we left, and we were told that first time I ever heard this, that Dallas was considered city of hate. We were supposed to be on special alert. This was all news to me. I hadn't been to Dallas since I've been in basic training with the Ohio Air National Guard. And I was looking forward to Dallas. This was the big, rich oil country, the Hunt brothers, Neiman Marcus. So we were on special alert, but when we got there, crowds were fantastic. In fact, you go, I write in the book, it's like everybody you hear Jackie, Jackie, Jackie. It was like nobody cared about the president. They wanted to see Jackie. All the way through I was in Love Field for the arrival of the president, first lady, and Clint Hill was the agent in charge of her detail, and I was working with him at that point. I was assigned to the press plane to go in advance. We would get to a location 10, 15 minutes ahead of the president who would arrive, and there would be a welcoming committee. Am I wandering off?
It's okay. You know, I'll keep you on track, Paul. It's fine. We talked about the question of the relationship between your protectee and also being the protector. I'd like to recognize Thomas Wells here in the audience. So Thomas was also a Kennedy agent. You're going to hear his story tomorrow during our Secret Service panel, but he was protecting the kids that day, John, and Carolyn. So again, we're delighted to have him and Paul here as well. Do we have some more questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for Mary. What was it like as a kid to be protected, and how did you adjust? Did you know any different? I mean, because that's what I hear a lot of people when they have a unique growing up. I didn't know any different. And then how was it when he wasn't president anymore? Were you still protected, and how long? Just kind of curious what your experience was as a kid having that.
Well, of course, the Secret Service left us when before Kennedy was assassinated, when he left office, and at the time, I didn't think of them as protectors. They were family.
Okay.
And I mean, really family. You know, we talked earlier about how Mr. McCullough named his daughter after my sister. You know, I mean, we were all very, and Mr. Dixon ended up buying my father's house and that kind of thing, which is right next to the farm. And so, I mean, they were like family. And, you know, I mean, I cried when I was leaving them, or they were leaving me. And then, sadly, Kennedy was assassinated, and they reassigned a lot of the same people that had been in Granddad's administration back to him. So that was kind of a happy reunion. Yeah.
Did you notice something? She still referred to them as Mr.
Oh.
She went back to that little girl, that little Eisenhower
Yeah,
girl.
yeah.
She still
Not
went
allowed
back.
to call them
and
by their first name.
there you go. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
What's that? Oh.
How many different versions of Air Force One did you fly on, and what were they like?
The question was, how many different versions of Air Force One did you fly on, and what were they like?
No, repeat. I'm sorry.
He asked the question, how many different versions of Air Force One did you work on? So before the Kennedy administration, at the Kennedy administration, Mrs. Kennedy changed the color scheme. So it was originally the silver black stripe with the red and the orange pinstripe. And then she changed the color scheme to the blue and white that we know today, white representing the clouds, blue representing the sky. And on the side of the airplane where it says United States of America, it's the same font as the title of the Declaration of Independence. And that's the color scheme that we see today with our airplanes at Andrews. So did you get to fly on the Silver Ghost, which was the airplane.
Columbines.
Yeah, and the Columbine. Did you fly on any of the planes before the blue and white?
I flew on the Columbine when we went to Augusta, and that was on my temporary assignment. And then I think President Kennedy was using the Columbine afterwards. I never flew on that or anything. Again, I'm with the children.
Low man. And again, the airplane Air Force One is not the name of the plane, it's only the code, and it's only Air Force One when the president is on board. So whatever airplane he's on, that's Air Force One.
Right, because there was a near miss between an Eastern flight
Told
and
the story today.
yeah, but I guess it was like flight 1, 2, 3, 4. Who knows? And the Eastern flight was flight 1, 2, 3, 4. But the Air Force had AF.
Yep.
And Eastern had EAS. But there was a air traffic controller that was kind of tired, and they with Granddad aboard.
And they tried to figure out how we can designate an airplane to let the tower know this is the president without saying it's the president. So obviously the president's on board, so they came up, they had the near miss. Then there was another Eastern flight that they actually gave clearance to land before the president's airplane. So there was a number of things. Finally, they get back to Washington and say, we have to come up with something. And that's where they came up with Air Force One.
Yeah, any flight that the president is on is Air Force One. Yeah.
Those airplanes are, by the way, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at the Presidential Museum. So if you ever get the chance to go and see them, go and see them. I've got 2 airplanes at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So you're old when your planes retire before you do.
You had mentioned code names, and I'm just curious what your code name was, and also how were they assigned? Did you get to pick your own?
Was that for Mary? For Paul. Paul, did you have a code name?
Oh, man. Not all agents had code names. And once I was assigned to the children's detail and with Caroline and John, I needed a code name. And I guess because I was so young, again, and this was regarding considered my coming out, my code name. Somebody came up with debut. So I was making my debut into a real assignment.
What was the
I heard a rumor that that the Eisenhower kids were called the diaper detail. I don't know whether it's true or not, but
What was the relationship between your grandfather and Billy Graham? Can you give us any incidences on that?
for me,
Yeah, your grandfather and Billy Graham.
Billy Graham actually converted my grandfather to Presbyterianism, where he had been, he always had faith, but he didn't, he was busy fighting wars and different things. And when he became president, Billy Graham became his, kind of spiritual advisor, I guess. And Granddad chose Presbyterianism, and he was. That was how he lived and died after that. He was buried under Presbyterian auspices and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was very special.
We talked about code names. So what was John and Caroline's code names?
Lyric and Lark, and the Lyric and Lark. Lark was John, and Lyric was Caroline, and then the code names are assigned by, by WACA, the White House Communication Agency. So all the code names come from them.
So Lyric and Lark were the kids' code names. Questions? Any other ones? Yes. Hello, Tim.
Mr. Landis had two questions for you. First one, were you aware of all of President Kennedy's maladies when, his chronic ongoing back problems, neurological condition? Were you privy to all of that? And then the other question I had for you, what was the tenor in the White House concerning the upcoming presidential election in '64, and was he looking forward to running against Barry Goldwater?
Lot there. Okay. What was it like in the White House? Was he looking forward to running in '64 against Barry Goldwater, the president? And did you all, as protectors, were you aware of all the president's ailings and his medical issues that he had?
No.
No. Okay. Short and sweet. Good.
Mary, this question's for you. History portrays your grandfather as this amazing leader of the Army, this really smart, intelligent man. What is one thing that you pulled from that, wisdom from your grandfather, that you hold on to?
I think open-mindedness. He was a Republican, but he was really nonpartisan, and he loved both sides, and that was back in the day when both sides could talk, and his fairness, and the other part is his integrity. He had an enormous amount of integrity and ironclad will. He smoked 5 packs of cigarettes a day during World War II. So that's just like light one and light another and light another. But it was the stress he was under. And he had heart attacks all the way through the war, but afterwards, he had a massive heart attack in October of '55. And the doctor said, if you want to live another 10 years, you need to stop those things. And he said, well, he might have taken him back up again, but he's never quitting again because it was hell. But anyway, I never knew him as a smoker because I was born in December of '55. But, his ironclad will, just on something like that, you can imagine the different things that he, saw during the war, also an ironclad will, like when the Holocaust camps came to light and he went in, that was a surprise. He was fighting Hitler, but he didn't know about and I think he said, I think it was Patton that, it was President Patton. He said, I had to stay to witness this, and I had to stay and make others witness it. He said, and Patton said he was going to be sick, so he had to leave. So, I mean, it's just, and of course, the scene was really gruesome, past gruesome. You can't even. And he had people take pictures so that we would never, including my father who was there, but we would never, forget, or that we would learn from history. And so when people today even say, somebody's a Nazi or whatever, it's kind of like, no, you don't, sorry. But anyway, it was his integrity and his and it came naturally. I mean, it was just who he was. And I don't know if it's, he had a very humble background, and I don't know if that made it, but they often said that his humble background was what made him able to get along with so many people during the war and things like that. You know, he was with a bunch of type A's, and you know, so yeah, I think his willpower and his integrity were.
Mary, you tell the
It's
story.
a long answer.
You tell the story about the funeral and the presidents, the formers coming together and for President Kennedy's funeral. And can you talk a little bit about that? And
You mean about Truman?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, back during Korea, Granddad, of course, was elected president, right? And Truman was mad at Granddad because Granddad wouldn't run as a Democrat. He decided that Taft was the original front runner, shall we say, and he was an isolationist, and he'd been through World War II, and he's like, no, you know, what happens around the world happens to us too, and he, you know, so he decided to run on the Republican ticket, and so that already made, you know, Truman said, I will be your vice president if you know, and he was president when he said it. And my father was in open combat in Korea. And so he said, I think that John ought to come home for the inauguration. And Granddad said, well, you know, he kind of thought that was a good idea, and he went to, you know, he contacted Daddy, and Daddy said, are you kidding me? You know, first of all, he looked just like Ike, you know, and he was in open combat in kind of an OSS type of situation, which nobody really knew about until after he died. But anyway, he said, no, you can't do that to me, you know, because good things happen to him because of Granddad and bad things happen to him because of Granddad, you know, and he's like, you know, So Truman did it anyway and brought him back. And Granddad says, he says, why did you do that to me? And Truman said, I didn't do that to you. Your president did. Anyway, so that was one. And I forget what the other one was, but there was another part of the riff. But anyway, when it came time to be, you know, the inauguration, there was a traditional tea that that the presidents have, you know, the current president and the future. And Granddad refused to go in for the tea, and he just sat in the car waiting for him, you know. And so, you know, you fast forward to when Kennedy was assassinated. I think I said earlier that, you know, Granddad had what he thought was a very special relationship with Kennedy. And they had a plate luncheon over at the Blair House. And Granddad was sitting on the couch, and you know, these two Midwestern boys, I tell you. But anyway, he was really blown away. I mean, he was really upset, and he just sat there. And Truman comes up to him and he says, "Have you had your lunch yet? Have you had, you know?" And Granddad just kind of looked at him like, you know, huh? You know, he was numb. And he says, "I'll get you a plate." And that was their apology to each other. And they died friends.
Amazing. Paul, last year, your first time at the festival, and you and Mary met up in the lobby of the hotel for that very first time.
Yeah.
What was that like to see her, you know, that first time?
Not just the kid again, right?
I need a drink of water. So we're talking about assassination.
I was talking about Mary, and when you came last year for the first time, the very first time that you saw her in the lobby of the hotel last year, what was that like after so many years? When you saw Mary for the first time in the hotel last year, after not seeing her for so many years, what was that like?
I'm still not understanding. I'm sorry with it.
When you saw Mary in the hotel last year for the first time after all those years, what was that like?
Oh, that was fantastic. It really was. I mean, you know, you don't see somebody for years, and you always retain the image of how they were. And all of a sudden, we have this lovely young lady who I last remembered when she was 3 feet high, tall maybe. And it brought back so many memories. You know, things you forget. All of a sudden, there's an incident or something happens, and bingo, all these memories of the past come into your mind. And I hadn't thought a whole lot about Gettysburg until then. And then all of a sudden, I started having all these flashbacks and things that that we did there. It was, I mean, it was really a pleasure to have that and to see you. It was.
Do we have any more questions, Christopher?
Hi, Mary. I have a question for you. I went to Columbia College, and one of my first memories is going up the stairs of Butler Library and seeing this amazing portrait of your dad. I never realized he was the head of the university. But did he share with you a little bit of his, his adventures at Columbia?
Well, he presided over Columbia in between World War II and the presidency. And it was kind of cut short because they wanted him to become active duty and go head up NATO. And so he was only there for about 1.5 years. But he was quite the scholar. And, you know, when you consider the background that he came from, you know, he had West Point, which was, but you know, wearing the little tassel and, you know, that kind of thing, you know, I think he really enjoyed the whole thing. Very relaxing time. But then he was called back to duty. There, you know, there was another thing too. One thing he asked President Kennedy was when he stopped being president, he asked if he could be sworn back into military, you know, back active military. And he would be called general after that. And Kennedy said yes. And so his epitaph says nothing about being president or even general, but he's buried in his general's uniform. Yeah.
I want to make one comment. How life was so much different than, sorry about the voice. Growing up was so much different, and you can't explain it to people what it was really like. You had to live it. And we've had generations since then that you tell them what life was like then. You can't relate it to life now. And I call it presentism. You can't take the past. If you want to know the past and learn the past, you have to listen to people that lived it. And the thank you. It's people that try to explain, well, mainly I'm concerned with it was associated with the assassination. They relate today, in today's conditions, what it was like, or like then. But for me, I mean, life was really good. And it's a difficult thing when you talk to people. You had to know what it was like, and conditions were so different. We've been told, historians, I think even today, have a hard time keeping things in place. And you can't relate it to what life is like now. I want to say it's a wonderful life. Almost.
Let's give Paul and Mary Jean another round of applause.
Thank you.
So we've got Paul's book. It's out in the lobby. Come by and say hi to Paul and get a copy of his book.
And if you'd like to take a picture of the two of them before they exit the stage, this would be the opportune time to do that. Thank you.